Welcome in to Vandy on SI. I'm Joey Dwyer here with Dylan Tovitz and Graham Bacco after Vanderbilt's 45-3 win over Charleston Southern. I think a night that was pretty imperfect for Vanderbilt in a lot of ways. Clark Lee had mentioned there were some stretches offensively where I think they sputtered, but overall I think as good of a night as you could have asked for from this Vanderbilt team. It was game one. It was natural that it was going to be imperfect. And I think the point two stands. We talked to Miles Capers, who been around since 2021. Obviously, people know what happened against an FCS team that year. Cedric Alexander has been around for 3 years now. His debut is against Alabama A&M. When you look up the bleachers over there, and honestly, it's half full, and Vanderbilt really struggled to pull away from that Alabama A&M team. To not have Vanderbilt's best effort tonight and it still get away with a win like this, that was never a question. Caleb Barnett punched it in the end zone in the first quarter and on the first drive of the game, and I'm thinking there, game's over. Charleston Southern really, it doesn't have a punch back from that. But Dylan, I'll swing it to you first since we went to Graham earlier. Thoughts on this one and the overall effort that Vanderbilt showed, and maybe the progress that it also shows within their build?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to what we said pregame, and it was we want to get out of there healthy, we want to get out there with a win and a stress-free win, and we want to see a level of intensity that really shows progress. And I think you kind of nailed it there, Joey. Like, you could pretty much tell by the third snap of this game how it was going to go. And they came out there, and maybe there were, some miscues with Pavia, and maybe the offense wasn't perfect, but they came out there with that intensity, that energy, and really kind of put Charleston Southern away before they even started. And I think that's all you could really ask for. And to your point, it wasn't a perfect game at all. There were certainly errors on both sides of the ball. There were penalties, there were miscues, and the fact that, and this is what you said, Joey, but the fact that you can play that kind of game, and of course Charleston Southern isn't some great team, but to play that kind of game and still get out of here with a 45-3 victory is pretty, I would say, impressive. And then you look forward on, and Clark talked a lot about this, you look forward on really to next week to Virginia Tech, and it's cleaning those things up. But again, if this is their okay game that they play, I think you have to be pretty happy with that going forward.
Yeah, and I think another story too is the crowd. Graham, we talked ad nauseum about it throughout the week. I thought that was a big step forward for them. I'm going to write about it tonight. I don't think it was perfect, but I think just seeing the environment tonight versus what they've had in the past, and even referencing those two games that we talked about earlier, ETSU and Alabama A&M a few years ago, that was a social event that had a football game being played out there.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Tonight was, I think there was a different level of intensity in the crowd, and I don't think that's something that they should take for granted, and Clark Lee certainly does not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be honest, we get here a couple hours early, and it's not, we talk about the sellout. It wasn't necessarily a sellout, but then you get very close to game time, and all of a sudden this place fills up really quick.
Yeah.
I mean,
Daniel Diermeyer said 90 to 95% showed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the crowd was into it. They were intense. They were loud. The environment is completely different than what we've seen in recent years. And Clark talked about how much he appreciates these people coming out. And again, people aren't coming here, just to talk and hang out with friends. They're coming here to actually watch Vanderbilt football and actually see their team go beat other teams. And again, we talked about it wasn't the best game, but it was still a very solid game. They got off, applied pressure really quickly, like we said, and then the quick strike offense. I feel like that really stood out. I'm sure we'll talk about this more too. But I mean, just the first 2-3 drives are just quick work, just right down the field, no struggle whatsoever really at moving the ball. It was at will. They could do whatever they wanted.
For sure, and I think a lot of that you attribute to what Dylan's going to write about tonight. They're quicker in the wide receiver room, and I think there were times where they struggled to create separation, frankly, and that was an issue. Martel Hyde even said there was tight coverage on some of the passes that targeted him. But Dylan, I think you're on the mark here. Caleb Barnett is quick. Tristan Brown, I thought would play more tonight. I actually thought Barnett would play less, but I guess Barnett's the guy to note tonight. You're going to write about Trey Richardson. You just think down the line, and even Martel Hyde, who didn't show a whole lot. I think even if they have offensive line issues, which tonight I think you could say maybe they are discouraged a little bit with what the offensive line did. I meant to ask Clark about that, but I needed to get some other stuff in. Dylan, I think that really helps them. They have a quick hitter game, and they really have the guys to do it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, speed is huge. Speed kills, and it's you could almost sense at this point that they were relying a little more on their speed, which in the past they haven't had the luxury to do. It felt like there was a little bit less of the pre-snap movement and, gadgety, like really like niche schematic plays with Clark, which Clark actually said earlier in the week, that they might do a little less of that this year. And they can afford to do that because they have guys who can, burn on the outside. They don't have to run, a bunch of crazy pre-designed snap movement in order to, run a jet pass to Caleb Barnett and have him, run for 15 yards. And, you saw it a lot with Trey Richardson on like the quick wide receiver screens. And you mentioned Tristan Brown. I think if he gets to play more, you'll see the same thing. Even, Martell Hyde is quick, Junior Sherrill's quick. Like the receiver room especially is a lot quicker than we've seen in the past. And obviously Eli Stowers is one of the fastest tight ends in college football. He completely outran a safety on that wheel route where him and Pavia connected. And it's huge because obviously it's easy to see against a team like Charleston Southern when we clearly, you look like the bigger team, the stronger team, and of course the faster team. But I do think a lot of what we saw tonight with the speed is going to show up in this SEC schedule. And even from the running back room, guys like MK Young, the ability to sort of bounce the ball outside, outside the hash marks and to get there quickly before the defense does, before they kind of cut off your angle. Like that's what, turns a 3-yard run into a 13-yard run. And that's something that, I actually thought Cedric Alexander was pretty explosive tonight, but he's not necessarily known for his explosiveness on the ground. I think that it was something he looked a lot better doing. I think it's something they're going to use those slot receivers for, Richardson and Barnett and anyone else who gets in. And I think the rest of the running back room, MK Young, even AJ Newberry a bit, really that explosiveness and there's no, you don't have to beat around the bush here. It is speed. Like speed is the word we're looking for. And I think it really did make a big impact tonight. And it's definitely something to monitor going forward.
For sure. I also think that makes them more sustainable too.
Yeah.
We have talked a lot about, especially this offseason, like Tim Beck, I think maybe got figured out a little bit. And I think a lot of that was he didn't have the personnel to where he could do things differently and really adapt. Like he could try, but at some point you have the offensive line you have, and Quincy Skinner and Junior Sherrill were good players for him, but also like what else do you have that you can really use? Yeah, I just think that they relied a lot on Pavia throughout the year, and I think even Clark was talking about maybe they have a little more flexibility to do other things. I'll go through a few notes because I think I'm going to forget to go through some notes, and I like to do that. First of all, thinking back to pregame, something we noticed, Cade McConnell, I think, is actually the backup center, even though he's not listed as that on the depth chart. Gunnar Givens got more snaps, quick guard tonight than I honestly thought he would in Cade McConnell's absence. And obviously Berlowitz got the quarterback 2 job. That's all cleared up now. I think we thought we'd see a little more Dante Carter, especially Dylan. We had talked about that. We thought he was a guy who's going to be able to start. And then another thing too, the crowd, we had mentioned this, but 90 to 95% of the ticketed people showed and they sold out. I think it really faded as the game went, but something to note for sure. And there were murmurs that Stowers and Pavia were on a snap count, and I honestly do think that was supported based off what we saw. Berlowitz came in a little bit before the fourth quarter started. I thought he was okay. He threw some into traffic, but I think also receivers didn't get a whole lot of separation. Graham, I'll go to you. We talked big picture. Any little stuff you noticed tonight that interested you? Obviously, couldn't see the team in fall camp, but you followed it as closely as anybody to this point.
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting to see how this offense works in person. I mean, we talk about the speed, we talk about Cedric Alexander, and also, I mean, think about the catch over here that Cedric Alexander had in the end zone. I mean, that was a heck of a catch, and then you had him hurdle here right in front of us is where it was. I mean,
I wish we were sitting here during the game.
Yeah, dude, like
good view.
It's a great view, yeah.
It's a great view, and yeah, just the offense, and also I think just the defense too. I mean, they were really good, and really strong throughout the entire game. You had C.J. Hurd, transfer from FAU. He got his first interception on his Vanderbilt career, and yeah, it's really just strong showing, offense, defense. But then, of course, we talk about the penalties and sort of the mistakes, and Clark talked about that. Joey, what did you see from those mistakes, from those penalties?
Well, Dylan and I were talking to Richie Hoskins' family before the game, and we were watching them when Richie caught the touchdown on the far sideline. They were fired up, and you could just see as they realized there was a flag out there. Oh, the energy was sucked out of them at that point, and I think in a way that hurt Vanderbilt as well too. Like that was right before the half. You bring it to 35-0 there. If Hoskins does score, instead 2 plays later you're on 1st and 30. I think that's a big deal, especially when you go to Virginia Tech, when you go to a big road environment. And also I think the Henderson penalty, I don't know that gets called everywhere. I think he was kind of caught out in space, and maybe that's why that was the case. But in any sense, Bryce Henderson, Isaiah Glass, 2 of their vets, I don't know that you can really get away with that when you play better teams. And who knows, maybe the focus waned, maybe there was some complacency there. But I think that drive was an example of where this program still needs to go. And we'll talk a lot about over the year, like their talent is better. They still can't afford to get away with that crap. Like that's the Vanderbilt football thing. You can't have a touchdown that's a 30-yard wide open reception. You can't have that wiped away by 30 yards of penalties and expect to get away with it. That's not something that this program does. And I know it's a negative tone, right, for a game like this, but Dylan, I think that's a big deal down the stretch if that keeps happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I think it's certainly not great to see. It's not ideal, and it really showed on that drive. In terms of really like the predictive power of it, like I'm not worried too much about it. I think that, Pavia was only sacked once tonight, so maybe if those holds were sacks, like we wouldn't be talking as much about it, because it would just be, the offensive line let up 3 sacks tonight, and both of those plays were really like long-winded plays where Pavia ended up, evading a sack, rolling outside the pocket. And I think those are plays you typically see holding penalties called on just because there's more time, which certainly is not excusing it. And I think, Clark mentioned it's something they really want to clean up, but I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about the holding. I think what they want to try to avoid, and again, Clark mentioned this in his presser just now, is those pre-snap penalties, like the avoidables. I think they had 2 or 3 false starts tonight, which isn't a crazy number. I think it was 2, which isn't a crazy number, but those are the things, Charleston Southern isn't doing anything crazy to, cause movement on the offensive line. Like, those are the things to me that really need to be cleaned up. And obviously the holding penalties are there. There was a late PI call on one of the rotational cornerbacks. I don't remember who it was, but I definitely think it's adjusting to those pre-snap penalties. And I think the offensive line did a really good job of not getting a lot of holding penalties. I think the brand of football that Pavia plays, especially when he escapes the pocket, will lend itself to those every once in a while, which again certainly doesn't excuse it, but it's something to note as well going forward.
For sure. I actually picked Blake Fromang, former Vanderbilt offensive lineman's brain on this throughout the game. Just kind of going back and forth with him, and I think a lot of what he said was the manpower wasn't a huge issue. Like, they were pushing around Charleston Southern a little bit. I think he said the pass pro probably was something that, and it concerned me, so maybe it was just confirmation bias based off of maybe what he was alluding to, but I don't think that was a great thing tonight. And also he said Charleston Southern blitzed a lot, and I think you can also attribute some of it to that. So Graham, I don't know that I'm super worried about the offensive line, but I think you get a real taste for it too next week at Virginia Tech. Yeah. Also, here's a kind of out of the box analogy here. I think of Jalen Carey last year, and I know that's a sore name for Vanderbilt fans, but in non-conference play, he really struggled to assert himself physically because the bodies weren't as big. I think once Vanderbilt, and there might be some of this, once Vanderbilt is facing guys that are more their own size and maybe not as agile even, I think that could be something that helps them as well, especially if they're seeing blitzes. And I don't know how many crazy stunts there were or anything along those lines. You kind of alluded to there not being a whole lot, but I do think that there is going to be a little bit of a learning curve. You got to remember this is an offensive line with a bunch of guys who haven't started for Vanderbilt before. Right. It's their first game. I think they answered the call physically, maybe some communication issues, maybe some of it is they're blitzing and naturally a guy's going to get through, but I wouldn't say I'm super worried about the offensive line. I still am not counting it out from being Clark Lee's best.
I'd agree. I actually think the communication looked pretty solid, from up in the press box there. I can't remember a time where it was like they blitzed and there was a completely free rusher and Pavia got hit like immediately or had to chuck the ball into the ground, when with a group of linemen that really hasn't played together, like group of very new linemen from all over the place. I thought that was promising to see, that there were no complete breakdowns on the line. But to your point, yes, there were times where maybe a guy got around too quick and Charleston Southern's, edge rushing is not anything extraordinary. So it's certainly something to note. And you mentioned there's not a ton of depth in the position group either. So this isn't a situation where like, maybe they could, shuffle a few things around. Like they have a few guys after the starters, but the depth isn't great there either. So I think it's on the guys that are in there to really kind of continue to build on tonight and play better again next week versus Virginia Tech, because it's going to be a lot. If the offensive line doesn't step it up, you're going to see that exploited a lot more against Virginia Tech, against South Carolina, and as we move forward than we did tonight.
Yeah, and it's game one, right? Like, we're not expecting, a perfect chemistry. We're not expecting, end of season type of playing here at the start of the season. And again, we got to remember the offensive line, full of transfers, full of guys that are just now starting to play together for the first time. So there's a learning curve, like you said, and next week's going to be a big test. ACC Power Conference school in Lane Stadium, which is one of the best environments I think in college football. So it's going to be very intriguing to see how his offensive line works after another week of practice and working together against an opponent that is very challenging and a team that is looking for revenge after what Vanderbilt did to them last year, upsetting them here. So I wouldn't say it's a concern for the offensive line at all yet, but definitely a big challenge coming up.
Yeah,
it feels like we're taking like a bit of a pessimistic tone now. So just to bring up something that I thought was really good tonight, I thought the secondary was really, really good.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
We talked a lot, previously when we previewed the week, how like Charleston Southern, they got a quarterback that could actually kind of sling it, and they're going to go a little bit more, vertical, pass attack, throwing the ball downfield. And I thought maybe, especially in the first half, maybe the Vanderbilt pass rush wasn't necessarily doing anything great. I thought the secondary held up really well, and we saw a bunch of guys get in. Obviously the starters were good. Colby Taylor and Height, who was on a bit of a snap count, who mentioned, there was a set plan going in for him on both sides. But we saw everybody get in the game. We saw Mark Davis, we saw Jalen Lackey, we saw
CJ Hurd.
Yeah, CJ Hurd at safety, and even late, Jordan Matthews, Tennessee transfer. Yeah, he really didn't play much in camp. I thought he looked great. I can't remember. I don't think he let up a catch. Like, maybe he did, but I thought really from the cornerback room, and then the safeties as well, between Hurd and Marlon Sewell, who I thought made a couple good plays. Carter when he was in there, even freshman Carson Lawrence got in a bit. I thought the secondary held up really well, and I thought that was something that, they played a decent amount of man coverage, especially when they blitzed. We talked about that earlier, how this is going to be a good test to see if they can hold up in man coverage. And they played a good bit of zone, too. But I thought the secondary was actually really impressive tonight. And if there was probably one position group where I would take away is, like, they looked really good out there, it would be them. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops.
For sure.
In future weeks.
I think it's a good point about the pass rush, too. I didn't see a ton out of them in the first half. I thought they really wore down Charleston Southern in the second half.
Sure.
I think the depth, and obviously they just frankly have more bodies. Vanderbilt's always been able to wear down FCS offensive lines for the most part. But I think that's another thing, too. Miles Capers obviously had a big play. That's why he came in the post-game press conference to talk to us. And again, all those guys kind of earned it. I don't think Height had a great game at receiver. That's okay, though. I also don't think they wanted to show him a ton at receiver. I still think he's got the tools to be a great receiver, and I just don't think that they wanted to really put all that out there. I was surprised he plays as much as he did. But I also think Cedric Alexander had a heck of a game, too. That unbelievable catch. And we were in the press conference, and I didn't even really realize how solid of a night he had until it's like, well, I could ask him about the hurdle, or I could ask him about the catch, and then you just keep piling stuff up. It's like, man, he had a pretty good night.
Yeah, he did.
And another thing, shout out to James L. Lassiter.
Oh, man.
A Vanderbilt fall camp scrimmage hero. Comes out, I think it's his first career carry, takes it 35 yards, turns the corner, gets in the end zone.
It's that speed again.
What a moment. James L. Lassiter. And you could tell everybody was excited for him. Clark Lee actually brought up the idea that he could get on the field at some point, too. They've obviously had some injury issues at running back throughout the spring and the fall. Obviously, they're healthier now than they've been, but I don't know that he'll be a guy that you bet on getting on the field a whole lot. But, man, he is impressed in a lot of his opportunities. So, yeah, guys, I think it was a good night for Vanderbilt, especially being able to see some of that depth get out there, being able to maybe stay true to how much you wanted to play a guy like Diego Pavia or Eli Stowers or Martell Height. And we'll talk about all the things they need to improve. Talking about that after a 45-3 win, I think is a pretty big deal as well, Graham.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, again, strong showing. Not the most perfect game, but look, you get out. But if you can say that and you get out with a 42-point win, I think that's a great night.
It probably should have been 45.
Yeah.
Gabe Giardina is a great guy. He wanted that.
Yeah.
He wanted that field goal.
Right.
No, he would.
Right.
I don't know what the motivation was there. I can tell you dang well he's sleeping a little bit better because they didn't get shut out.
Oh yeah, no one likes getting shut out. I think it was pretty clear he didn't want to, which is exactly why he kicked it with 7 seconds left in the game. Like, just to avoid a shutout. That's it. Simple as that.
And Clarkley took the high road in the post game, saying that we should have got the stop if he didn't want the field goal, and he's right. But Dylan, you got to respect the level of pettiness there to say, hey, we came all the way to Nashville, we are not getting shut out.
You do. I do respect it. And, Lee mentioned actually interesting tidbit. He basically said that Drew Dickey was going to go into that game if they had gotten the ball back. So I think they were maybe a little bit annoyed at that aspect that they couldn't get Dickey in. And Clark said maybe we'll see him at some other point this season, although, maybe Utah State or something like that. But, I mean, you do got to respect it. I think Charleston Southern, the scoreboard obviously didn't show it, but I thought they played a pretty strong game, and they played the right way. So I think it was a good matchup overall, and it's good to obviously get out of there with the win they did. We've talked a lot about how it was an imperfect game, and that was still the result. So they're gonna get back at practice this week. Clark talked a lot about really this week kind of that attention to detail and how we game plan for a specific opponent. And how that was kind of new for them because obviously, this isn't fall camp anymore. And I think Clark said there was a bit of an adjustment period this week. I know he mentioned on Thursday that he thought the intensity was a little bit down from where it was kind of at the beginning of the week. So I think this week they're really going to kind of move on to Virginia Tech and learn from the mistakes they made, where they can improve, and we're going to see a cleaner game next week for sure.
Yeah, that's the big test. Graham, I think you'll be there with me.
Yep.
Hopefully you don't have to sleep in your car once we get there. Dylan, I don't even want to tell the viewers where Dylan's going to be watching this game. I don't think.
Want to know.
I don't. All right, it's not that bad, but
it's not that bad.
He'll probably be in his dorm or something.
I'll probably be in my dorm.
Yeah, but
probably be in my dorm typing away.
Yeah, I hope. See, I like that.
Yeah, I know. You're gonna put me to work.
This kid is a worker. He's good, and Graham's good as well. But I think it's a big test for Vanderbilt next week. We're going to find out really what they're made of. I think Virginia Tech is probably better. It's probably tougher to play them at home. But even Kyron Drones said to our guy, Graham, at ACC Media Day, he said it is a revenge game. All three of their guys there said that. I'd expect there to be maybe a little bit of tension next week. It's a big game. I think, Dylan, you talked about in the pregame, like, it's going to be a game that tells a lot about the rest of the way this thing goes. We're going to end with Charleston Southern tonight, but Dylan and I are going to talk Monday on the podcast. Graham and I are going to talk Friday, and we'll be with you next Saturday. So be sure to get to Vandy on SI for our coverage. For Graham Bacco, for Dylan Tovitz, I'm Joey Dwyer, and let's make sure that Graham doesn't sleep in his car in Hokieville next weekend.
Oh man, that'll be fun.
Yeah, well, it'd be more fun if you didn't have to.
Not sleeping in a car would not be ideal. That is for sure.
Yeah, I mean, good for you being in the dorm room.
Yeah.
You got to play if you're watching and have a place of refuge for Graham.
Twitter,
Facebook.
Reach out to me at Graham Bacco on Twitter.
Nice plug.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. But
follow Graham Bacco on Twitter.
Exactly. But man, I am excited to be in Lane Stadium.
Yeah.
It should be great. One of the biggest, or one of the best venues and most unique venues in college football.
For sure. Thank you guys for watching. God bless. We'll talk soon. See you Monday. Peace.
See you.